Seems really loud. So there will be some things that you're going to be reading off of the screen or be looking at and sharing. And so if those of you back there need to come a little closer, you're welcome to.
Come on, kids.
Or be willing to speak loudly when you answer our questions.
Oh, well, we're from Harvard County, we speak real loud.
I'm so glad to see all of you here tonight. You know, sometimes it's a little scary when you try to do something and you wonder if anybody's going to come. So, a little bit of introduction. I've been doing cemetery research for the Utah State History and Archives for probably about 25 years. And I really like to do ghost town cemeteries because I know that if it isn't done ASAP, there won't be anybody still left to give you any information at all. So when I first started doing this work for the state, they let me choose the cemeteries that I wanted to do. And so I did Victor out east of Elmo and Desert Lake, and I did the Muddy, which is over by Emery, just to name 3. And I initially thought, well, there are 8 towns, there's probably 8 cemeteries. There are 22 cemeteries in Emery County, and several graves out in the desert. So I soon learned that 8 wasn't gonna cut it. So Val said one time, I'd really like to help you with that cemetery work, and I said, and I'd really like you to, because I won't get it done in my lifetime for sure. But I said, you're gonna have to learn to do research. And then it wasn't too long after that till his sister called. She likes to walk in the Castledale Cemetery. She has a husband buried there, and so she often walks around and she'll call and she'll say, get on that thing you look up things on. Doesn't do computers. And tell me if this person is in Family Search. So, because I was knee-deep into a project at that time, I said to Val, this would probably be a real good one for you to take on. See what research you can do and see what you can come up with. And so he did. And he did an awesome job. He really likes to research now. So, we'll go through this slide presentation and be thinking about these blanks that are up here. Have you ever wanted to be a detective? Have you kind of thought that would be kind of fun? I have a lot. How many of you have played Clue before? Yep. Okay, so like I said, we'll go ahead and go through this presentation. We'll talk, and then sometimes we'll ask questions as we put things on the screen for you to look at. Now, when we're done, if you saw the flyers at all, you know that there's a little thing at the end that we really want to get your opinion on. It was a ghost town cemetery that Val was assigned by the state, and it has turned out to be really interesting. So, we'll go ahead and get started.
So, you may recognize the concept of the game of Clue with Colonel Mustard, one of the characters, right? Well, we're going to talk about who killed Sergeant Gillis. And you remember that one of the clues in the game is a place for the murder to have taken place is the library. Well, we want you to listen closely and help us answer that question as to who killed Sergeant Gillis and where did he get killed and with what? We don't have a candlestick either, but we will ask you to pay attention and help us. Now, how many have been to the Castledale Cemetery? Have you ever noticed in the very southwest corner or area of the cemetery, there's a single headstone? It's out there all by itself. It's a good 150, 200 feet from the rest of the headstones, from the rest of the cemetery. That is the headstone that Bernice was talking about. My sister, in her enjoyment of visiting cemeteries, saw this lone headstone, and if you will look, it's sad because it's out there all by itself. Now, the research that we wanted to do, as Bernie said, is find out why it's out there, who's buried there, why is he buried in Castledale, and we want you to help us see how much you can learn from a simple headstone, because we came to know Elbert Kenneth Gillis really well, and he's a good friend now. Unfortunately, he's dead, but there's still a connection between us and him. So,
we're going to start the research process, and all we have to go on is what's on the headstone. So,
what's there?
what
Anybody.
What you see?
You don't need to raise
Name.
His
his
name.
name.
Mhm.
Where he was born.
And he was, says he's from Texas.
Well, it says Texas, so that's a clue, right?
Yeah.
We're looking for clues. What else?
U.S. Army.
U.S. Army,
What's that, Sergeant?
Staff sergeant.
Staff Sergeant.
Yep.
When was he born?
June 30th,
1897. When did he die? 1940. So, did he die in the war? No? Okay, so there's some information that we can get off the headstone, right? Just in a little bit of deduction.
Okay, we've talked about these things that you've mentioned. Why is he buried in Castledale? If he's from Texas?
If he's from right, if he's from Texas, how'd he end up being buried in Castledale?
Maybe he moved to Castledale.
What's that?
Maybe he moved to Castledale.
Possibly.
Possibly. Look at that last name. Are you familiar with any Gillises in the area?
No.
Anyway,
Oh, Julie, really?
I've heard of it before, but I've seen this, I've walked past this so many times that it's kind of,
So you're thinking that's where you're familiar with it?
maybe so.
It was a Gillies family in Green River, but it's spelled differently.
okay. Have any of you heard any tales about this lone headstone as to who might be there? Julie has.
I have.
Would you share those with us?
The ghost story goes, that he was black and was all alone, and somebody felt sorry for him and buried him clear out there in the corner, and somebody else later put up the headstone. That's the tale that.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Now, did you all hear that?
Yes.
So jot that down in your mind as to,
Possibilities.
he's a man based on the name, right? Rumor has it he's a black man. And someone found him apparently dead, huh? And took pity, and they buried him there all by himself, not amongst the rest of the graves,
Because he was black.
because he was black. And that's understandable, being 1940, is it not? Okay, so now remember that. Let's see if we can prove or disprove that, okay?
Okay, so
Where's the in-family search, did you find him there?
we checked, we filled out the forms to see if he was in there, and he was not.
Did you hear what Roger said about trying to find him in family search?
And that's exactly what we did.
Okay, how many are familiar with family search? It's a great research tool. And hopefully, maybe you will be inspired to do some research. See, we don't know Mr. Gillis, so are we limited to it says family search, so what does that seem to say to you? You can search your family, right?
Okay, we found that he's not in family search, so where do we go from here? Do we just forget about him? Because you know, when you build a tree, you build by yourself, your parents, your grandparents. So you really need to hook somebody in somewhere in order to put him in family tree.
Was he in Ancestry? Did you look there?
Tom had a thought.
He was a sergeant in the military, so there would be some military records somewhere.
That's right.
Okay, good thinking.
If you have access to Ancestry, you can often go into Ancestry and find people that are not on family search. And a lot of them who've been in the military might have like a pension record, or if he's considered a veteran, they have veterans cards, Veteran Administration death cards, and burial.
Thank you. And Roger mentioned Ancestry also. Judy?
Well, you can also go to Texas and in his birth year and look for birth certificates. You can do that.
We
Did you try it?
we weren't able to travel to Texas.
Well, no, you can go online. You can go online and put in
Okay.
Texas in 19 such and such and see if you can find the name in the birth certificate.
Okay.
Perfect.
Or you could look for a census record near his birth date.
For what kind of records? Census.
Yeah.
Or death records,
What's that?
death records too.
There you go.
Okay, we're gonna explore a lot of those. But first of all, we've got to get him into family search. And he's not gonna connect with anybody that we know of yet. So, there is a little spot where you can hook an unconnected person. Okay?
So even though it says family, there's a way to do for non-family, right?
So you go to family tree and you select across the top the word recent. Sometimes you have to click find first and it's in the drop down. At the very bottom of recents, it said add an unconnected person. So that's what we did with Mr. Gillis. Once we got him in, boy, we found a whole ton of stuff, and you have listed most of those as we've been talking.
And see, you mentioned, census, World War I records, marriage listings,
Ancestry.
and we did involve ancestry. And someone mentioned military records in general. We found this military record in searching for Elbert.
This is why I wanted you up to the front, so you can help us read this.
Somebody mentioned a death certificate, didn't they?
Francis did.
So we went, go ahead and bring that up over there. We're hoping to find something about him from the death certificate, and you can explain it.
So the death certificates in Utah are online from 1904-ish, when they started, until about 1968. They're supposed to be private for 70 years. And so they're a little bit behind. Well, private for 50 years. They're a little bit behind. They should be into the 70s. But I did notice on the website the other day that if you have a particular interest for somebody in like 1970, you can contact them and they'll put it online for you or send you a copy. So, what interesting facts can you find from this death certificate?
And see where we want to find out more about Mr. Gillis.
So up
Well,
in the top left corner,
Yeah, he did die in Emery County. Now, don't look at this side yet. We're gonna just look at it. Yeah, somebody already did, didn't they?
Of course they did.
So again, we're still looking for information.
Must be
We've confirmed
45.
his name, so that is who, it's the right person that we're dealing with.
What does it say right there, Julie?
Says it's white.
It's white. Mhm.
Yep.
But there is a black man in the cemetery, but it's not this one.
Yeah, it says he's white, it says he's a veteran of, I got arrested on Bernice's head. A veteran of World War. Now, why doesn't it say World War I?
Because there was only,
In
first
1940,
one. It
there
was the
was
Great
no-
War.
That's
Because
right.
there was no World War II, right, at that point. What does that say? Social Security number? Not known. What about the rest of the stuff?
There's not much known.
You know how old he is?
About 45 years, right? Because you can deduce that from his birth date on the headstone. And do you want to talk about where he's buried, or should we go through the other?
Well, we do know where he died. Now, how did he die?
Yeah, it says he died in Woodside, and that's confirmed over here. So, the game of clue again. Sergeant Gillis apparently was killed. Where,
Because it says homicide.
where was he killed? In Woodside. How? How was he killed?
A knife wound to the chest.
Yeah, internal hemorrhage, knife wound in the chest.
Yeah.
Are you interested in going further?
we better.
Or should we, is this enough?
Go to newspapers.com and check out the newspaper.
We're gonna do
Gotta be a
that.
Story.
You're saying to look at the newspaper, huh?
There's gotta be a story in the paper.
Oh, you bet there is.
Uh,
Okay, so it
I don't know why
also,
it says white.
Because they have seen him now. Like Judy said, the rumor was he was a black man. But what did we just discover? By an official record that was created when they actually saw the body. if they saw the knife wound to the chest,
Yeah, they threw the body.
then they know what color he was, right?
Hope so.
Yeah.
So that dispels that rumor. But that, that's part of the fun of it, is if there hadn't been rumors, well, it wouldn't have been nearly as fun. So, yeah, so they saw the body, they being the sheriff, the Emery County Sheriff, Dr., I forget his name. Oh, Dr. Easley, who was practicing in Farron at that point. Yes.
Well, it couldn't have been an accidental knife wound because it said it was homicide down there.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep. And so as we go along, we're also filling out more information on the family search page. Okay? So sometimes you have to joggle back and forth a little bit.
And see, it confirms he was buried in Castledale on June 8th of
But it
1940.
also says, where did the injury occur? And it says Emery.
Says what?
That's the county.
The county.
Oh, the county. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, so it
Oh,
says
yeah.
Emery County,
Okay, yeah.
In Woodside.
state
Oh,
of
and also-
Utah.
It also lists the funeral home, Mitchell's.
Yes, so somebody didn't just grab him and put him in. He went through embalming.
And Mitchell's,
Well, he
still
went
open.
through a
Yeah.
medical examination because they have a murder now. The sheriff's got a murder he's gotta solve, and so the
Well,
reason he wasn't buried close to when he died was because he had to have a medical examiner give him some more information, okay?
Would,
It's Whitbeck.
would it be useful to check with Mitchell's to see if they have records that go back that far?
Possibility.
It says Whitbeck Funeral
I can't
Home,
see
that was a
Mitchell.
funeral
Oh,
home right
Whitbeck?
down around the corner here.
yeah,
Oh.
Whitbeck Funeral Home right here.
Okay, I can read Mitchell from here.
You've gotta come up closer, huh? Okay, so we also see that he was buried in Castledale, like Val said. So why was he not buried in Woodside? They have a cemetery,
Well, just like you said.
quite an interesting one, but
So Francis is saying because of the investigation, they must have probably brought him to the county seat
For the autopsy.
to,
Yeah, Whitbeck Funeral Home was residents in Castledale, it says.
okay?
That's why they brought him in.
So, okay, now, there's another reason.
Probably, in a circumstance like this, the burial becomes a responsibility of the county.
exactly.
Exactly, yep.
Oh.
Exactly. So, indigent burials are, you know what an indigent burial is? It's, there's nobody to take care of him.
Yeah, it's the result of all this.
They had no idea where to send him. But they did get some military records, and they did find out that he had an aunt. But we'll go through some of the disasters that happened in that part of life, and she was not of financial means to be able to pay for him to go back to Texas. So Castledale,
So it fell to the county, like you said.
yeah, Castledale at this time was the indigent cemetery. Each county has a specific cemetery that they have for indigent burials. It's now Lawrence. It's not Castledale anymore. But at this point in time, it was.
And the reason he's buried where he is in the Castledale Cemetery is because that was the section of the cemetery that was set aside for indigent burials. There was no racism associated with the fact that he's buried out there all by himself.
I'm curious who put up the headstone.
Oh,
Doesn't-
We'll get there.
We'll
doesn't
get-
seem like Castledale would do that for you.
We'll get
We'll
there.
get to that.
Okay.
And Castledale's never used that other area around it since?
Well, there are some other burials, but I'm not sure why he seems to be a little off to himself.
Are they indigent?
Well,
Because
talking to Lamar, he had several urns of ashes that, in his office, that didn't get planted for a while. So I know there are other burials there. I just don't know for sure. I don't know for sure how far they go as far as marking them. Why is he marked? Why is Elbert marked with such a nice headstone?
now
And
if
it
it's
is
in
nice.
the army,
That's
there you
right.
go.
Except that he's a veteran.
So if there are other indigents who may be buried in that same indigent area, who would have gone to the expense to get a headstone for someone no one knows anything about?
Well,
Other
maybe he had a
than-
mother that did that. No, he didn't have no father, but family with husband and she didn't have the money to bury him.
So you mentioned the military, and he's right. You asked the question about who did such a nice headstone. We'll talk about that, but the answer's already been given.
Because usually the military I've seen are just the bronze plaques that are down on the ground below.
Right. It is curious that it isn't just a bronze plaque with information, like a lot of veterans.
Well, that
Graves
was
are
change
marked.
in time, a change in time.
So did
So,
you find out when that headstone was put in? Cause it's got to be more recent than 1940.
we didn't find out for sure.
I don't think I think it's really close to 1940. Because you'll see those same kind of headstones in Civil War cemeteries. Those are the kind of headstones they used in the Civil War.
Or to mark those graves. So maybe it's just a change in the way the military marked veterans' graves. Is at one point they used a nice headstone. Now, yes, Tom.
My dad died in 1911 or 2011, and on his foot he's got a nice bronze plaque from the military for his, not his headstone, but his foot
For
plaque.
the footstone.
So they've been doing it for years.
It's my understanding that usually the widow applies for it. Ellis didn't have, well, he did, but
He'd been married twice,
they
but
didn't
divorced
know.
twice.
Yeah, they didn't know who his.
And like it says here, they don't know anything about his spouse.
So the
but-
county asked for this from the army or whoever was, said that, he passed away here in Emery County, and so Emery County requested that they bring a headstone or whatever.
I don't know for sure how it came about, but normally the widow applies for the stone. And she determines whether it's a small one, whether it's a big one, because in the form she fills out, it designates what she prefers,
But also it says she was contacted.
the mother.
The mother was contacted, and she didn't have the financial means to pay for any kind
To
of
take him
headstone.
home, but the
Or-
army, the military, furnishes the stone.
So we aren't certain why it's such an elaborate stone. But I suspect maybe cost had something to do with it. Maybe a bronze plaque likely is much less expensive than a nice.
But if you see those military cemeteries in France, Normandy, they all have heads, they all
The
have
same,
full heads
yeah.
like those, similar to this in shape. So that's probably kind of the standard issue at that period of time.
And if you look online at a Civil War cemetery, you will see this kind of a marker.
So I guess changing with the times.
Right. Okay, here's another date that we can add to Family Search. That lists the burial date. So now he's pretty well filled out as far as where he, you know, his Family Search page is getting pretty filled out.
Because we have it, well, we still miss some stuff, right?
We still are missing,
Don't know anything really about his life yet, though, do we?
no, but we're going to learn a little bit more by the census.
And you mentioned, you know, the census would be a source. He was born in 1897, so which census would he first appear in? They were done every 10 years. 1900. How old should he be? About
3.
Okay, let's see what we can find. Go ahead.
So this shows his father, William T. Gillis, his mother, Florence, and him as a 2-year-old. Now, depending on what time of the year and his actual birth, that can be off just a little bit.
So
It is within
on that
it-
census, do they typically put age at last birth date on the 1900?
The age is on almost every census.
But
Right,
the last birthday. she
Often
said.
they put the age at their last birth date.
Yeah.
Okay, so he was born in June of 1897, and this particular census, I think, was in April. So he's just not quite 3
So
yet,
he's still.
okay?
If he's not quite 3, he was 2 at his last birthday.
Yeah,
right?
and that's
Yeah.
what the guy.
So you're probably right. The age he was at his last birthday.
But they don't say, how old will you be in a month? They say, how old are you? So, okay, now going across there, we see that his father is a white male, born in March of 1863. He's 37 years old, and he's married, and he's been married 4 years. Okay,
Let's do Florence, his wife. She's white also. She's a female. What's that say?
August.
August 1872. She's 27. She's married also. She's been married for 4 years. She has 1 child, and that child is living.
so the 1900 census and the 1910 census was the only time they asked the mother, how many children do you have and how many are still living? And lots of times that's really helpful. If you're missing some children in the family group sheet, you'll know that there's some blanks there.
And we've already talked about Elbert, and it confirms that he was born in Texas. Turns out his hometown, if you will, is Nevada in Collin County in the state of Texas.
Okay, let's go ahead and look at the 1910 census, and what do we see?
What's his father's name on this one? Thomas W.
So it's flipped, hasn't
But
it?
that's okay. The census takers just had their own way of doing things.
Well,
But-
they wrote down what they were told, so.
So maybe at this point, he was going by Thomas William rather than William Thomas. He's still the head of the household. He's male, white, now he's 46. What does this say?
This is his second marriage.
It's his
Oh.
second marriage, you're right. And they've been married how long?
1 year.
1 year. And he's married to
Kate.
a woman by the name of Kate. Now remember that name as we go along. She's
And-
28. This is her first marriage. She's been married 1 year, but she has 0 children. Okay?
So Elbert's mother has died. So his stepmother's name is Kate.
Do we know that she died?
What's that?
Do we know that she's died?
The Florence,
Florence.
the first one, that's
Is
what
she
we're
the-
gonna show you right now.
Okay.
Can you read that back? Can you read that anywhere?
It says she died in 1908 on her headstone,
So, okay.
okay?
So that made Elbert how old when his mom died? About 10,
Cause he's 12 now.
roughly,
Yeah.
because he's 12 now.
Okay, and there's Aunt Kate's headstone.
Oh, and look at that. Says Aunt Kate.
Florence's sister?
Interesting, huh? Florence's, you asked Florence's sister?
So she legitimately was Aunt Kate,
Aunt
wasn't
Kate.
she?
No. She died in 1958.
So she outlived him by 17 years, Ellis.
She obviously was 20 years younger.
Yeah.
That's right.
He knew how to pick them, didn't he? Okay, so then in Ellis's war history,
We mentioned again from the headstone, and we confirmed with his death certificate that he served in World War I. We haven't got copies of all of the military records, but it turns out he enlisted in 1920, June of 1920, I think it was. He,
No, it'd have to be before
The
that.
Argonne Force was battled.
I mean, well, I'm sorry.
about 1917, 16,
Right.
right in through there.
Well, the war ended in 1920, right?
1918.
No.
It started in 1918.
No,
Anyway,
14.
sorry.
I wasn't there, so it ended in 1918.
The armistice was 1918.
Okay. So, he was assigned to the artillery. And his artillery battalion was assigned to the East Coast to patrol the East Coast to ensure that there was no invasion from the enemy crossing the Atlantic. Would be pretty good duty, wouldn't it? I mean, how many attempted invasions are we aware of that threatened the East Coast of the United States? Anybody know of any? Pretty good duty for a young man. But, as I mentioned, he ended up in France and fought in the Battle of the Argonne Forest. What can you tell me about that battle?
Very terrible.
What's that?
It was a very bloody battle, wasn't it?
Horrible. Have you seen pictures of the Argonne Forest
during battle.
during and after the battle? It was a beautiful, pristine forest, really. Anyway, but during the battle, all that's left are just they look like it's been burned over by a forest fire. Estimated there were about 1 million soldiers involved in that battle from all of the countries that were participating. Casualties were about 500,000. And it was primarily an artillery battle. And you can imagine all the chaos, the noise, and the destruction associated with artillery. You know, folks in the Salt Lake Valley recently complained about Camp Williams doing firing some of their howitzers, and it was scaring the people in the Salt Lake Valley because it was so loud. Now, put yourself right next to a piece of artillery, being one who's loading and or firing. Again, here's a young man, I think he was 19, and all of this death and destruction, and imagine the smell associated with that.
Wow.
They had a lot of horses involved in that war. There were a lot of casualties, you know, dead horses, but all the destruction, it wasn't easy duty like had been on the Atlantic coast.
But he was honorably discharged, and he was awarded 3 medals. So.
And he made staff sergeant. What does that tell you about him?
He's pretty smart.
He did well.
Yep.
He did well for his job.
So he's released from the war, because it's over, and he comes home and apparently spends a little bit of time there, but not too long after he's home, there's a disaster. A tornado in 1927 destroyed the area in which he lived. F4 tornado ripped through Nevada, leaving 19 dead, 100 injured, and property damage exceeding $650,000. Now, what have we seen the last 2 or 3 weeks? Damage from an F4 tornado. So you can imagine how hard that was.
And that was described as being, well, it says a half-mile wide, but the destruction occurred not only at Nevada, Texas, but at a town 35 miles north of Nevada, and another one 25 miles south of Nevada, as well as what occurred in Nevada. And it mentions those towns here, Wolf City and Kellogg. So a quarter-mile wide swath, and you're talking 50 miles long. He was a farm boy. The commerce there was agriculture, and Nevada was the center of the shipping of the agricultural products. So what happened not only with the towns, but what happened with the economy? Kind of tore up some farm ground, didn't it? So did he have a home to go back to?
So at some point, he re-enlisted in the service 3 times. So you can see the smartness of that, because it gave him an income, and it gave him probably a place to stay, place to live.
And I think it gave him an identity, because here his father died in 1930, but his mother has already passed. He has no home to go back to. The records show, we mentioned the hospitals for volunteer soldiers. We found him in the record for several of those. The only physical injury that's reported on the records is he lost a finger. Now, I don't know, what did they call PTSD back in those days?
Shell shock.
Shell shock. I've put myself in his place, being maybe 20 years old, being exposed to that kind of carnage. I think I might be a little bit shell-shocked myself. And I believe that's why he was in the military hospitals, more so than a physical disability.
So as we moved along, we tracked him through the 1930 census, And we find that he's in a workhouse in Delaware. So those are
Yeah, Newcastle County Workhouse.
pretty much like a prison,
Oh.
like a jail.
Yeah, we wanted to ask you what a workhouse is.
Whoops.
The English ones were for poor people, that's where they sent them to,
Yeah, that's,
theoretically to put them to work, but they sent them there to die, most of them.
yeah, and I think we hear of workhouses in England, and it was for the poor, you know, they didn't have any other way to sustain themselves, so they'd put them in a workhouse, supposedly to save them. But, see how he's referred to here in the Delaware workhouse?
He's an inmate.
That says inmate.
Mhm.
We don't know what he did.
And we're not sure how long he was there, because he could have been there 19, 25, 27, whatever. This is 30 census, but it doesn't say how long he was there.
And again, his father died in 1930. His home was destroyed in 27. My opinion of him was, he's just kind of a ne'er-do-well troublemaker.
Today, we would call it mental health.
Good point.
Today, a person with that background that's been through all that, he'd be designated mental health.
So maybe, okay, that's more gentle than I was being with him, isn't it?
Well, even if he'd been an inmate, even if he'd done something wrong, isn't that what they do today? They say it's because of what he's been through the service, and then they have mental health, and
Yeah, and think of it. He could have been a homeless veteran, or what we see as homeless veterans nowadays. Maybe that was Elbert. But the Delaware workhouse, this is what it looked like in 1930. And there's a lot of history about it.
None of it good.
It was overcrowded, it was understaffed, and they had men and women in that same facility, overrun by rats, poorly financed, and you notice they call those stocks. This is a whipping post. That workhouse was famous for its cruel punishment of the inmates, and its fame was because of its whipping post. And they invited the community to come and observe when they were disciplining the inmates. It wasn't until 1968 that they outlawed the whipping post in that workhouse. 68. And I didn't make the mistake on that one that I did earlier. It was 68. I thought, oh my gosh.
So as we moved on, and we tried to find him in the 1940 census, he has gone from one end of the country to the other. He's gone from Delaware clear to California.
Now, why would he end up in California? Between 1930-ish and 1940.
Gold rush.
That could have been, that was back in the 1840s.
Wasn't that the Dust Bowl era?
The Dust Bowl year. What happened in 1929?
Stock market.
The Great Depression, right? How many have seen the movie or read the book by John Steinbeck? Ed, what is it again? Grapes of Wrath. Anybody seen the movie? Yeah, that depicts the United States in that period of time. There was a mass migration, and you mentioned the Dust Bowl. What happened to agricultural land. The drought, it blew away in
Looks
the
like Emery
Midwest.
County.
It was a mass movement to California because that was the land of milk and honey. They were raising crops in California, and there was a migration across the country, just like we see migration from the south into California for the opportunity of harvesting crops. So, Elbert apparently joined the migration, ends up in where in 1940? California, Sacramento, but where? The county jail.
You know, when I got thinking about that, I told you he was smart. He had a place to stay, he had food, he had.
So she's less critical of him than I was. Was is the operative word, because that's not the whole story. But you notice, again, this is the 1940 census. It was taken in April at this facility. When he was in Delaware, it listed his occupation as an electrician. In 1940 in California, 10 years later, it lists his profession as an electrical engineer. What do you think I thought of him? What a man.
You're a smart guy.
Yeah.
At some point, he went to college. We did find out that he graduated from
Columbia.
Columbia University.
Is that not impressive? So my ne'er-do-well troublemaker put me to shame because he got an electrical engineering degree from Columbia University in the midst of all of this other stuff we see as part of his life. Go figure.
Okay,
Why
so,
was he in, yeah, go
why
ahead.
was he in Utah, Jeannie?
Some of the stuff with the jail could have been for a place to stay and have food.
That's
You know, through
yeah.
all the Dust Bowl and all this, stuff that happened to him.
Exactly.
He may have just thought, you know what, I'll get a place to stay, a roof over my head, and hopefully some food.
I'll do something stupid and get arrested.
It could be just minor crimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Just enough to get a, like you said,
He
he's,
should have a job.
yeah, he's
Get a
pretty
roof over
smart,
his
isn't
head.
he?
County jail.
Yeah.
Okay, so why was he in Utah? So he's on his way from,
Well, the census was April of 1940. When did he die? June of 1940. So he's gone from California to where?
He was headed towards Texas, but didn't make it there.
Exactly.
how far did he get?
Woodside.
To
Woodside.
Woodside. That's exactly right.
Well, before the 1940s, wasn't that when the CCC camps came to Utah?
Oh, you're brilliant.
Have you been reading our slides here?
No. Speaking of years.
So how many have you heard that question? CCCs. Have you heard of them before?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
When is the alignment?
Yeah.
Was
Well,
one in Farron.
one in-
There was one in Castle
one in-
Dale.
yeah.
Camp in Farron.
Yeah, a lot of the desert, the grazing improvements on the desert,
Swinging bridge down there they
swing, yeah,
And lots of trails and trails.
ponds and,
And Ed's writing a book about it.
built. The road to,
Aren't you,
Grand
Ed?
Reservoir.
so the CCCs, yes, were part of the culture here. As it turns out, Yeah, let's tell the story before you show all of this stuff. And I confirmed this with Ed, he remembers the same as I did. Turns out, Elbert was traveling from California to Texas by train. Yeah, sounds fun, doesn't it? But remember, he just got out of jail. So, you suppose he could buy a ticket on a train? He hopped the freight. Turns out he and another gentleman named, help me.
George.
Yeah. George Noble boarded, and we don't know if he got off the train at Helper and then got back on, but he got into a boxcar on the train that had stopped at Helper. And lo and behold, who said CCC? But in that boxcar were 5 CCC boys from the Green River CCC camp. They had been to Helper. This was a Saturday night. They were in the boxcar, having spent the weekend at Helper, wanting to get back to Green River. Now these are probably, 20-year-old boys, about 18 to 20. So 5 of them are in this boxcar. They joined 2 45-year-old men.
How did you find out about him being in the boxcar?
Oh, we're getting to that. He just won't let me push the button.
Okay, you tell your story.
Where was I? Oh, so the we can use this. We just aren't showing it yet, are you? Okay. So the records show that they all ended up in the same boxcar, and the train is headed to Green River. Now you give your spiel about somebody said something about newspapers before. Anyway.
So several years ago, the Historical Society had the option to get all of our Emery County progress digitized. So now they're online from 1901 when it started until pretty much the present time. And you can go and Google Utah Digital Newspapers. And because this was such a high profile murder, there are a lot of newspaper articles that talk about all of the things that happened in this murder. And not only are there 7 articles in the progress, but it was covered from Logan to St. George to Colorado. So if you want to really dig into this and get the nitty-gritty and get the meat out of it, this is where you'll find exactly what happened.
But as I remember, and don't trust my memory, but Ed will straighten me out, the Elbert ended up getting stabbed, as we have found, at Woodside. His body was found the Sunday morning along the tracks at Woodside. Again, he had been stabbed in the chest, but he had also been stabbed and cut numerous times in the back and other parts of his body. The train made its way onto Green River, and the young men reported to their commander there that these 2 fellers, I'm assuming there was some spirits involved in their personalities at this time. Anyway, George Noble asked Elbert for a light for a cigarette. And apparently George didn't like how Elbert responded. So the report says pocket knives were produced. Now, to me, that tells me these weren't hardened criminals because they didn't have real weapons. They had pocket knives. So they had a pocket knife fight. George got cut in the hand. Elbert got killed. Again, stabbed in the chest, cut on his back and other parts of his body. Ended up off the train along the tracks. The boys reported it to their commander at the Green River camp. That's what started the whole investigation. And again, and I remember, I'm skeptical of the outcome of the trial because of this. George Nobles was found that it was self-defense. Again, the wounds on Elbert in the chest and in the back.
One report even said that his throat was cut.
So, am I defending myself if I'm stabbing you in the back? Ed?
One of these articles lists the jurors. Go look at that. There may be some of your relatives. It was not a random jury. There was a prominent individual from each town on that jury. So whether we would like the result or not, it was a very distinguished jury.
It was. It was. But the testimony from those 5 boys was it was self-defense. So what could the jury do otherwise? What evidence is there that it wasn't self-defense? But what 18 or 20-year-old guy is going to stand up to a 45-year-old man who they've seen him just kill somebody? I wouldn't be brave enough to say, yeah, he killed him. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's my own bias. But George was found not guilty, or found innocent because of it was self-defense. Again, when they did all the investigation and all that and tried to put him to rest, Aunt Kate couldn't afford to have his body shipped home, nor could she afford to even have him buried. So the county took care of that, again, in the indigent cemetery. And that's how Sergeant Gillis was killed at Woodside with a knife and buried in Castledale. Now, I still have an affectionate feeling for Elbert Kenneth Gillis. I think he was a good man.
Me too.
Thank you. Okay, now, any questions or any thoughts? We really appreciate all your help. Now we really need your help because we did some research at the Diamond Cemetery up by Eureka. The town is no longer there. The town was named Diamond because the early folks there saw all the sparkles up in the foothills. And they thought, diamonds. Turns out it was gypsum. How many of you been out on the desert and seen all the sparkling of the gypsum crystals? That's what it was. But at any rate, there's a cemetery there. There you go.
Okay, so normally when we go to a cemetery, Val goes through with his camera and he takes pictures of the headstones and I try to map them.
Well, we gotta wait till he gets back. You better make it quick.
He'll be fine, you can go on.
But he can't miss this part.
No.
So you can see from this aerial view, there's no rows.
Rows of graves.
There's no graves, no rows that you can see.
You can see the fence line that defines it.
And you can see all the trees. So in this particular graveyard, I think the family went in and they said, oh, I like this spot under the tree, let's put her here. Or another little spot over here, it's kind of a nice little place, let's put him here. So the mapping was not even possible. It says on the cemetery when we turned it in, randomly
distributed
scattered.
amongst the trees and the sagebrush. That's where the graves are. So we pulled, oh, go back a second, please. Right here is the gate that you saw the picture of now. So we just parked right here. I started taking pictures, working my way back and forth across this way. And so, we want to show you some pictures. And again, I took them with a digital camera. And when I take pictures, I don't look to see how good they are, if they turned out or not. So I didn't look at these pictures after I took them. Good, perfect timing. But we looked at them when we downloaded them to the computer when we got home. That's the first time we saw the pictures.
I'm just gonna go through them.
No, you're not.
So you can see this.
Bright.
You can see this is an old cemetery just by the way the gate is.
Okay, you go ahead, you just show the pictures. I've worked my way across about half dozen graves, and most of them were just, again, overgrown with sagebrush and so forth. I came to this one, and they marked off the graves with 2x4s, and some of them had fence posts, so it was like a little corral around the grave.
You've seen some of those in some of the cemeteries that you've been to, how they put them in a little fence.
But these were all in disrepair. So, came to this one and took this picture. Here's another picture of it, just from the foot looking to the headstone. And I don't know why I was so taken by this grave site, but that's just a old rough limestone and has some stuff carved on it, but I couldn't really make it out. I had spent maybe 30 seconds at most of the other graves. This one, I looked at the camera and on the photos after we got home, and I spent over 5 minutes at this one, so go ahead.
There's flowers on it.
Here's another picture of that same.
You didn't bring the flowers, did you?
No, they were there, but we didn't see this when we were there.
So I'm gonna back it up to the picture just before this one. You can see it's the same spot.
See, there's the end of the 2x4, there's the post, there's the sagebrush.
But
There's
what's
the
that?
end of the 2x4, there's the post. We didn't see this till we downloaded it when we got home. It wasn't in the other picture, was it?
See that?
Those pictures
Not
were
there.
taken just seconds apart, but we didn't see it. Okay,
Moving on.
so then I left that one, took pictures of several others, and came around to the east end of the cemetery. And you see a headstone here. You see there's another grave site here. I wanted to take a picture of that to show the relationship of them to the east fence. And when I took that picture, in my mind I said, you've got to go back to that other site and take a picture from a different angle. Now, we didn't see this until we downloaded it at home. again, I was prompted to go back to that other side, so we go back to the other side. And remember the flowers, the post, the grave. I just walked up there and I took the picture and was ready to go, but my camera took 2 pictures. Show them the second.
Whoa.
Been back there to see interesting.
We have, and we didn't see those. But see, notice that. You all see that?
Yeah.
Look at this right here.
Yeah.
Remember that little round, bubbly looking thing where I said, I gotta go back and take another picture? I didn't know what followed me, but anyway, went back, the previous, go back please to that, okay. Now you can see what I said, the camera took 2 pictures. It went click, click. The first one, the second.
There's someone there.
We're asking you to tell us because we don't know. Okay, let's go
There's
on.
another little one in the front of that one though. Go
Where?
back 2. Go back another one. See, right. Yeah, right
That?
there.
Go back, do it again, see if it's, hey, it's gone. I hadn't seen that one. You'll have to come to the house when we download them and help us look.
Okay, moving on.
That one looks like a guy standing there.
Well, and we thought, and some folks have said, well, it's just a water drop on your camera.
It wasn't raining.
It wasn't raining,
Or sun glare.
or
There was no
sun glare.
sunshine either.
And it was
Yeah.
just set.
It was
same
overcast.
second as the other one was taken.
And if it were a water drop, you would think the drop part would be down
It would be
here,
heavier at the bottom.
not up here, or,
Yeah.
you
With a
know.
point.
Anyway, okay, so then I continued on past the east fence. Here's another grave that was against the north fence. And I just took the picture and I'm just documenting it. Oh, sorry. But, again, what do you see there?
That up at the top, yeah. Looks like the same.
And see how it is a little bit lighter down at the bottom? Because you can see through it down there. Okay. Okay, so then I continued on along the north fence and went to the gate, stepped through the gate, and thought, well, I'll just take a picture before we go. So I turned around. That wasn't there on the picture that I took when we first got there.
Our daughter is a photographer, and so we brought her down and showed them to her. And within her group of friends, she has inquired with several professional photographers, and they weren't able to help us.
They said water spots, they said sun glare, and they're not all taken from the same angle, so they aren't all looking to the west into the sun. This one is looking southeast kind of, and you may remember what the picture was like when we first started there. They were aimed in all different directions. Tell us, because we don't know.
You need to get with the author that gave the presentation last Saturday for the paranormal.
We thought about
Because that's the kinds of pictures that they showed.
Oh, is it?
I think his name was John Olson. Talked about ghosts and cryptonics and fays and I don't know. Anyway, he showed pictures like that.
Did you find any names on any of the graves, or is there a record of who's buried there somewhere?
very few. They're
Well, somebody wants, from the other side,
Yeah.
to me, wants you to know, wants to be found.
Can I share with you what my feeling is?
Oh, you will.
No, I won't if you tell me not to.
No, I'm just joking, go ahead.
When we did the more research on the cemetery, I think there are only 14 burials there, right? Early on in the history of Diamond, the town of Diamond, a family was there as part of the development, and 2 little boys were born. While the family lived there. They're buried in the grave. We have their names, there's no location or anything.
But then the family moved and they split up.
The family moved to Camas. There was no record or indication of any interaction between the parents or siblings and those 2 little boys. Family moved to Camas. Like Bernice said, the mother and father divorced. She ended up in Colorado, he ended up someplace else. The family is not a family unit.
We still want their
So,
Do you have any kind of a time frame of when Diamond was
Yeah.
a town?
1870 to 1890. Just 20 years.
and it's totally gone now. They took materials from the buildings at Diamond and used them for buildings in Eureka and some of the other mining towns around there. So nothing left of Diamond. You've seen the cemetery. It's in disrepair. There's one set of graves that have a nice picket fence around them and have nice big headstones, elaborate, you know. Couldn't find the little boys' names on any of the stones. Anyway.
Any questions of
No.
anything that?
Give us some answers, not questions, yes.
It's been an A+ presentation. I'm saying, I'm super glad.
I want to show you some really funny things, just one slide before we go.
Yeah. Remember when we were talking, you go ahead with yours. Remember when we were talking about Elbert? And we said we didn't think we could do anything with him in family search because he's not a relative. Well, this happens all the time with Bernice. Go ahead.
So anytime you look at somebody in family search, you can go right here and it says view by relationship. I often do that on some of these old cemeteries just for the fun of it. So I did that with him. And he was married to my 9th cousin. So we did his paperwork about it.
Yeah.
This is an incredible experience. If you aren't doing your family history, which the words make you think, all I can do is work on my family. It's misleading because Bernice has. We'll tell them about the Widow of the South, and then we'll go eat.
I came over here one day when Dottie Grimes was the archives director. She had a book on tape on her desk and it said The Widow of the South. And as we travel, we try to take something like that with us. And so I said, is this any good? She said, oh, it's really good. So I borrowed it. And to make a long story short, this lady's plantation in Tennessee was confiscated by the Confederate Army and used as an army hospital. And when they when they got there, she was so depressed, she was in bed because 3 of her children had died, and she was not getting out of bed. Well, the war ended up at her doorstep, literally. And they used her bedroom as the surgery room. And at that point in time, you know, if there was a damaged limb, they cut it off. They'd cut them off and throw them out her window.
This is an upstairs window?
And upstairs, and in those days, you know, the rooms were 12 feet high. So before too long, that stack of limbs had gone from the ground up to her window. This particular battle in Franklin, Williams, Tennessee, was slated to be the bloodiest battle in the whole Civil War. In 5 hours, they had 9,500 soldiers either wounded, killed, or missing. It was horrible. And this story tells what she did with those soldiers. Her whole plantation house, and it's huge, had them laying all over as she was her and her slaves were trying to doctor them. And when they ran out of room, they took some to their neighbors to do the same thing. And some of those soldiers were in her home for at least a year till they were well enough they could go home. In the meantime, 1,500 died. She had at one time 4 generals dead on her back porch. And, you know, they couldn't do anything but put them in a mass grave. A year and a quarter later, her husband and her slaves dug up those boys. From the information that was in their pockets, they figured out what state they belonged to, and they sectioned off a portion of their plantation, and they buried all of those boys in state sections. It's a fantastic book. You really ought to get it and read it.
What's
Really
the
good.
name of it again?
But you got their names, right?
Their names have been recorded.
They were in the book, right?
Carrie McGavick was the lady. She took all of the names that she could get, and she put it in a book, documented what they had on them when they were killed, and till she died, she was very young. She was a beautiful young lady. Till she died, she had her home open for anybody that wanted to come to see where the soldiers were buried. And I became so engrossed in this book that I thought, they can't just lie there. They've got to be in family search. They just have to be. And I was amazed at how many of them I turned out being related to. Only because my family's been in the United States since before the Revolutionary War. And it's amazing how many relatives you can have when you've been here that long. And the crazy thing, I can remember being in elementary school and I'd say to my mom, am I related to her? No, you're not related to him. I wanted to be related to my friends, but my mother said I wasn't related to anybody. So I'm finding out that that's not always right. Tom?
When I go in on family search for temple names,
Mm-hmm.
it gives me my lineage to that person. My great aunt, uncle, or aunt, somebody so many times removed, and every single name has got that genealogy.
Yeah, that's what she showed right there she was on this side, Gillis was on this side, goes back up to a common ancestor. He was married to your great aunt.
Well, Jeannie, relate what happened in that release society thing, genealogy thing. How many people in Cleveland are you related to?
Oh.
Oh, well,
I'm
everybody in
from-
Emery
I'm
County
from
is
Idaho.
related.
And when I hadn't been here very long, and I went to a really exciting thing, and they had, relation to everybody. They were doing family search stuff. And, anyway, I was related to about 8 or 9 of those sisters. And it was, the women there, and I was just shocked, because I was from Idaho.
You have to be careful what you say about anybody around here because you may be talking about your relative. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you so
your.
much for your participation.
Sorry to keep you so long.
Please have
Glad you stayed.
a refreshment. Ed's picked apples off his tree, and I can attest they're wonderful. And there are some really yummy donuts back there.